wanted to make sure that we were keeping our stakeholders in mind, and really ushering in a robust strategy that was going to support as seamless of a transition as there possibly could be, right? And so in doing so, and in the spirit of doing that, we focused on 4 key pillars, which you'll see here on the screen: engagement, training, communications, and adoption. Really engagement being kind of our main focus. Again, I mentioned we were dealing with over 150 stakeholders, but really our focus on how we were going to prioritize addressing their gaps between the old and the new, but also making sure that they were aware of what was happening, engaging that awareness so that we could really make sure that our plan was relevant in terms of how we were communicating with this audience, how we plan to train them, and then ultimately how did we plan to sustain prolonged adoption. So I mentioned our stakeholders, and they were obviously a key proponent in how we established and developed our change management strategy. So in doing so, we had several interviews, met with folks in person, virtually, to ultimately discern, and also with our key stakeholders, or I should say key project sponsors, to really discern our stakeholder landscape, really. And so we use this map to really plot all of the groups that we've identified and ultimately identified them in as being impacted by the change in varying degrees. The strategy is that we wanted to make sure we engaged with this group consistently, whether it was setting overall broad awareness communication to just make them aware or include them with all the stakeholders and make them aware as to what Copperleaf is, what does this change mean for you, and what's actually in it for you. We also wanted to make sure that they were included in key decisions. So this solution and the development of the solution is not just we turned on Copperleaf and now we're good to go, now that's our capital planning solution. We actually needed to make sure that the technology was enabling the process. As we are going through and redesigning this capital planning process from end to end, we are keeping the folks who are actually going to be instrumental in orchestrating the process close in our heart, in our minds. So their input was heavily leveraged in not just our change management considerations, but also just the overall development of the solution. So there's some ownership there, right, where folks actually felt, or ideally our goal was that folks felt like they were a part of the solutioning. They were also the ones, because they were informed in solutioning, we leveraged some key folks to actually support the rollout of our change management efforts. We wanted to also figure out how do we make sure folks are staying informed and the right level of detail is going to the correct audience. We identified 6 communication channels, and the way we identified this is really just aligning, is really taking our best practices, but also aligning with what has worked at Alabama in the past. So going left to right, the project walking deck was really more so to give people an understanding of what the project was, no matter what their relationship was to the project. We leveraged the project walking deck to really help educate people on what led Alabama Power to choose Copperleaf as its platform, and then ultimately how we planned on developing and leveraging the platform. Our capital planning hub site, which is also kind of our step up from the project walking deck, where we wanted to create a centralized location for stakeholders and just curious followers of Copperleaf across the entire organization. So not only did we leverage this to sort of, I would say, create a more live version of what Project Copperleaf is about, but also a way to solidify a repository for our learning materials, all the training materials, all the training, recorded trainings that were conducted, as well as all the governance materials and materials that were created to be more so the leave behind for people to continuously reference on their own. The monthly newsletter, similar to the Project Walking Deck, is to keep folks aware of how we're progressing and all the latest things that are going on with Project Copperleaf. but in a monthly format. And this was sent directly to folks' email. So our Change Champion Network, which is probably the most important piece of this entire change management effort, right? So these are folks who we identified within each business unit to are resident experts, but also be a peer, a true ear for on the ground to all the folks who they're shoulder to shoulder with on a daily basis, to be our two-way feedback mechanism, collecting information from stakeholders that we may not capture because we're interacting with folks on a more peripheral level, but also helping with cascading messaging, key messaging around what training is going to be available, when do you train, when do you test, when will this platform be made available to you, and what does that mean for each type of user. So our Change Champion Network is still instrumental to this day, even after we've gone live, and ultimately we're going to leverage them to be our super users as we continue to evolve the adoption of the solution. I wanted to leave you with the understanding that the change management strategy is a very holistic view of our adoption.
Very early on in the project, we got together our project team and brainstormed what are target benefits that the organization is trying to achieve with the use of Copperleaf and improving the capital planning process. And what we have here on the screen is essentially boiled down into three major target benefits. The first being to improve the capital planning process and the efficiency around it. Second being improving communication of the plan, both internally to executives and also externally. And then third being improving the value that is being created from the capital plan for the internal organization, shareholders, and also ratepayers as well. And so through those target benefits, we've gone through and started to identify what are various metrics associated with those, and we're currently in the process of establishing the baselines for these target metrics